So, where is called me the top?
Yashoda.
Yashoda. Just...
I know what the top is because he told me he was serving me.
Oh, tell Yashoda he should come because he can bring his plate if he wants. So, thank you all for coming, which is remarkable, you know, given that you had previous knowledge of who the speaker would be. And by the way, could I have a glass of water? That was part of my contract. I get free water. Hare Krishna. So I was asked to speak on Veda Veda. Chinchivya. Simsaiva disciple Ali Krishna is really funny. She said she was going to start a Vaishnav sorority, college sorority called Veda Veda Tattva. Anyway, so yeah, the flight's about to take off, so you need to be seated with your seatbelt on. Thank you. So the point I'm going to argue for here is that in fact Veda Veda characterizes the nature of reality at practically all levels, whether it's ontological, the nature of what exists, the nature of relationships at all levels, between human beings, between souls and God, that basically we live in a Veda Veda reality. So I will come on in. So I will go over a few examples. Well, let's start with relationships. When I was young, relationship could be any kind of relationship. I noticed a semantic shift. I noticed that the world changed, and now when you say relationship, it means like a romantic relationship, like I'd like to be in a relationship. And I thought, well, you know, you have your parents, you got your siblings, and anyway, but at a certain time, it came to mean a certain kind of relationship. Be that as it may, consider a romantic relationship. If the two people are, well, let me say there's one sense in which when two people, let's say, enter into a relationship, an intimate relationship, a third thing is formed. You have this person, that person, and then you get a new third thing, which is a couple. And if it's a good relationship, it is a couple, which is a word in the singular. At the same time, if the two people are too much merged, it's called codependence. If they don't maintain their individual integrity, it's called codependence. If there are two individuals, it's called a bad relationship, probably leading to separation. So it's just the nature of a healthy relationship. The nature of a healthy relationship is that two people are one and they're different. It's the nature of material things like the sun. If you ask a simple question, when the sun shines, is it all these different things you see in astronomy textbooks? For example, the core of the sun, where kind of like, you know, the engines are working. Is it the core of the sun, and then you get the surface of the sun, and the sun flares, then you get the sun rays. So is it just a system with many different parts, or is it just one thing, the sun shining? Is it just the sun shining? It's actually both. So, so one and different, for example, this is an example I've often given. So sorry if you've already heard this. No refunds. Oh my God, he's saying the same stuff. I want my money back. Anyway, what do you expect after a big lunch, right? For example, we're all sitting here in this room right now, and in order for you to, let's say, be in this room and be sane, you have to be able to distinguish between really hundreds and thousands of different things. For example, your body, someone else's body, different parts of your body. Don't try to sit on your head. You'll be uncomfortable and probably fall over. So you have to be able to distinguish the different parts of your body, what other bodies are, the floor, the ceiling, the door. You have to make so many distinctions. And when I'm speaking, grammar, language is actually much more complicated than people imagine. And that's why you get so aggravated when you call up some company and you get a robot that can't quite figure out what you're saying. Even if it says, hi, I can understand what you're saying. And of course, it never can. So to understand language with all the different parts of speech and all the different, language is very, I won't go into all the details, but grammar and language is extremely complex. And so you have to be able to do all that just to understand what I'm saying. At the same time, you have to be able to put it all together into one seamless whole. So it's just the experience of being here now, so to speak. So you have to both make all these distinctions and you have to be able to put it all together into just one whole. So one and different is everywhere. The members of a family are all different, but it's all one family. And one of the main points of sociology, the field of sociology, when it was in the sort of the small amount of spare time they had when they weren't promoting Marxism, but one of the main points that sociology established, that it's not a superfluous discipline. It's not that we don't need sociology because, after all, what is society except a collection? You probably, oh, yes, someone's going. So the idea, I mean, psychologists, at one point, some psychologists said that, well, what is society but just a group of people? And we can study all those individuals. We have psychology, we have history. Why do we need sociology? And the answer was because there is a reality to groups which is greater than the sum of the parts. In other words, social psychology, the way people act in groups, the way people act in communities or in societies, is not just the sum of individual psychologies. That there are social dynamics, social psychology, which has its own reality, its own principles. So there again, I mean, if you look at our own lives, every one of us is both private and public. Hopefully you have a private life, or you may be one of those people who likes to go on reality shows and not have a private life. So, but I think sane individuals do have a private life. We have a private life and we have a public life. In our private life, we're individuals. In our public life, we're members of groups. We are both individual and we're social. Without society, you wouldn't be able to understand what I'm saying right now. People cannot acquire language individually. People cannot feed themselves individually. People cannot protect themselves individually. People cannot be people by themselves. All these things come by participating in a society or a community. At the same time, the purpose of the society is to help the individual to be a meaningful individual. We do have a private individual life that's important to us. And we are unique individual souls. Come in. It's much better if you just come in than if you take 20 minutes to open the door. Yeah, come in. Hare Krishna. Everybody now, we'll take a minute and everybody stare at them. So even if you look at who we are one with other people because we're members of categories like human beings or Vaishnavas, etc., so we are members of groups. At the same time, we are unique individuals. So one and different is just anywhere you look. It's just the nature of reality. It's not only our relationship with God. It's the nature of everything. So, and we are one and different. We are one with Krishna, and we are different from Krishna. So, as Prabhupada put it, one qualitatively, different quantitatively, which, by the way, when I read that, that's when I decided, much to my alarm, that I was going to have to join the Hare Krishna movement. So, I think I was also going to speak on how this applies to spreading the Hare Krishna movement, right? That's in my contract. So, I would like to approach that thing. What does one and different mean in spreading Krishna consciousness? Well, I'll begin by saying this. Unless the public feels that they are somehow one with us, and obviously we are different in some ways, we're not going to be very successful spreading this movement. I mean, you could start an international society for handicapped turtles and perhaps make as many new members every year as, you know, the Hare Krishna movement. So, in terms of Western people, I mean, you could have a website. You could. No, I'm not being facetious. I mean that. I mean, I'm sure you'd get a lot of support because. No, you could probably get hundreds and hundreds of members if you put it out there. Anyway, so I mean in each individual country. I mean we're assuming you had this in like 100 different countries. I don't just mean, you know, for a total world. So anyway, if it's just a fact of life, of human psychology, that people do not join things that they can't identify with. They just don't do that. You know, there are some people that identify with things that are really freaky or wild, but they're a very small number of people, and often they have other problems which makes their participation not entirely desirable. So it's just a simple fact of life. People like to be around people who are like them. For example, you're from New Zealand. Let's say you were traveling in China, having a good time, appreciating many things. And let's say you were out somewhere in some city and you met someone from New Zealand, maybe from your hometown, who actually was kind of a nice person. I mean, immediately you two would become buddies in China. The same thing that happens when a Chinese person meets a Chinese person they can relate to in New Zealand. And that's just the way it is. Why is it that, for example, in any major city, I assume, I don't know about Auckland, but certainly I'm sure it's true in Melbourne or Sydney, certainly true in New York, London, Paris, all these major cities, there are Chinese neighborhoods, there are Japanese neighborhoods, there are Latino neighborhoods, there are African American neighborhoods, there are Filipino neighborhoods, there are Asian Indian neighborhoods. Every group has our own neighborhood in major cities. You know, there's always Little Italy and little this and little that. In the Boston area, there are Irish neighborhoods. So why is that? Jewish neighborhoods, Muslim neighborhoods. Chinatown. Yeah, of course, Chinatown. Why is it that when you go to a major city, people, to a great extent, end up living in neighborhoods with people who are like them? Why is it the studies show that, for example, if you look at hiring practices in modern universities, they tend to hire people who are like them, who agree with them. Therefore, the ratio between left and right among faculty, especially in the humanities, which used to be maybe 2 to 1, left over right, politically, now is something like 30 to 1, because there's been a purge. Leftist professors have purged people who don't think like them politically. Even if it's a geology department that has nothing to do with politics, they only hire people who are like them, who hold the same views they do. So now, given that fact, which I hope you can understand, that people feel comfortable with people who are like them. People want, and therefore, what about the Hare Krishna movement? When we go out and basically almost everything about us is different. Are people likely to feel at home? They may enjoy it. I mean, people love to go to see exotic shows. The exotic is definitely appealing and attractive. People pay money, they go to shows, they watch movies, they travel, international tourism, but in almost every case, they come home. They go to the exotic stage show and they enjoy it, and they come home, back to their normal life. They travel internationally and they come home. Talk to, and most people who are traveling in other countries, they'll tell you after so much time, after so many days out on a tour, they just say, I just want to get home. I just want to sleep in my own bed. I want to see my friends. I want to see my family. So the idea that we can present something exotic and attract a significant number of people to leave everything they're comfortable with and permanently move into something very exotic is something which is not true, as history is showing. So anyway, but as far as one and different, I think that's what you were talking about. How does this work out in terms of what if I could have any ISKCON I wanted? What kind of ISKCON would I have? I can't, by the way, so no one need fear, because I have no power to have the ISKCON I want. But what would I propose? What would be an ideal ISKCON in my mind? I think very simply, it'd be an ISKCON that works. And by works, I mean fulfilling Prabhupada's desires. I have very, very clear in my mind what Prabhupada ultimately wanted, because he always told me. And so, obviously, ISKCON is a society in which we have to respect diversity. ISKCON is a society in which, people have a right to practice Krishna consciousness in a way in a way that works for them. Oh, what is it? Oh, live stream. So perhaps maybe I should open it up to questions early, because I may not be speaking to things that really concern you. So, yes.
Yes, Maharaj. Panishvanam Sahasri said that the souls, when I joined, we were...
He was quoting the verse, by the way. He's quoting the verse of thousands among human beings. Kastya one tries for perfection, of thousands who have endeavored and achieved some perfection, one knows me in truth.
So that sloka, to me, the core value is that we are going to target the 1%.
Or the rare souls.
I said, no, we will get the...
Yeah, I know. I think we all know exactly what you're saying.
So now,
and we all know what Prabhupada said about it. So
now my question is,
yes.
I think what we're talking about here is that there's a refocusing here that you're offering us.
Am I offering a refocusing? No, I would say that let's go back to the real history of ISKCON. First of all, Prabhupada never, how should I put this? Let me put it positively, although negative is kind of more fun. Prabhupada constantly urged us to attract large numbers of people, to change the world, to change human history. Prabhupada constantly talked about that as something that was our it's right in Prabhupada's Pranam mantra. It would be absurd to say that Prabhupada came to this world just to look for the rare soul, when in his Pranam mantra, he talks about saving whole countries. Paschatya Deshatayane. Now, it is a fact that only one may endeavor, but one could argue that, as Prabhupada often told us, that Krishna came Krishna came 5,000 years ago and ultimately taught us to surrender to him. But then Krishna noticed that people weren't really doing that. So he came again. He came again to show the world how to surrender to Krishna. So if you take that verse, Manushanang Sahasreshu, is Krishna describing the necessary situation of the world no matter what you do? Or is he describing what actually was happening at the time? For example, if we look at the history of Lord Chaitanya's movement, we find that Lord Chaitanya came and he spread his movement. And as even Western historians record, within 100 years, Lord Chaitanya's movement became a powerful influence in India, attracting many millions of people. So we have recorded history of Lord Chaitanya's mission in which it was large numbers of people. We have Prabhupada putting in his pranam mantra. Prabhupada taught us every day to describe him as someone who came to save entire countries. And in many, many conversations with me, Prabhupada emphasized that we had to specifically establish our movement powerfully in the Western countries for obvious reasons, because the Western countries are the leading countries. You know, historically, things go around. Sometimes it's India, sometimes it may be China, sometimes it may be Europe, whatever. You know, we're not talking about, Western chauvinism here. We're not saying ultimately what's better and what's worse objectively. We're talking about a geopolitical reality. That's the way the world works now. And Prabhupada recognized that. That's why he went to New York. That's why he didn't stay in New Delhi. That's why he didn't go somewhere else. He didn't go to, he didn't go to Bolivia. He didn't go to South Korea. He came to New York City. Prabhupada came to New York City and he constantly exhorted. If you look at Prabhupada's lectures, if you look at Prabhupada's preaching during his entire time with us, he was constantly urging people to join, constantly giving us a vision. This is what the world could be. There should be, Prabhupada says at the end of his Gita introduction, let there be one scripture in the world, Bhagavad Gita. Let there be one deity, Krishna. Does that sound like going for 1 in a million? Prabhupada's talking about world revolution. He says in the, that famous verse where he says, that this message will bring about, the Bhagavatam says, a revolution in the life of human society. Prabhupada says in the preface of the Bhagavatam that there's a tendency now toward a one world concept, that people are no longer limited by geographic boundaries and so on and so forth. And Prabhupada calls to the world. He puts out this great call to the world, let Krishna consciousness be the Yuga Dharma. And that's another point. What does the word Yuga Dharma mean? Does it mean 1 in a million or 1 in 10 million? Or does it mean the primary religious process for an age? If you look at the history of India, because if you talk about 1 in a million or whatever it is, history shows that there was a tremendous upsurge of bhakti movements in India, even before Lord Chaitanya came. He kind of capped it off. And that, tens, if not hundreds of millions of people worshiped Krishna. So Krishna says, Yomang Veti Tattvata. Sure, maybe all these, for example, let's say all the Hindus who worship Krishna, I'm sure if you, scratch under the surface a little bit, they're not all philosophers, and probably maybe not so many could give like a really coherent account of what Krishna actually teaches in Bhagavad Gita, because the tendency in India is to say anything and then say, well, it's in the Bhagavad Gita. And then you find out the person saying that never read the Bhagavad Gita. Of course, it's not so different in ISKCON. Everything's in the Vedas. So anyway, we just have massive, massive evidence about what Prabhupada really wanted. And therefore, I'm trying. I don't necessarily expect to succeed. I have no idea. I just work here. But I'm just trying my best. Yes?
I was wondering, like you're saying that we're trying to reach, the adults and And I was just thinking, when Papa was around, that he did a lot of outreach in media.
You did a lot of what?
Like he reached people through like going to TV, going to
He did. I mean, not. I would say he didn't really focus on that. He did do programs here and there. I mean, it would be nice, but you see, it's not just enough to go in the media. It's not enough just to be on television. I'll give you an example. I'll give you an example of super media, the Hare Krishna exclamation point film, which, if you look at the reviews of the film, in the New Age media, it got good reviews.
Which film are you talking about, huh? The new Prabhupada one?
Yeah. If you look at the mainstream media, you know, the media that most people pay attention to, it didn't get good reviews. And the reason they gave, which was actually a fair criticism, they said that it was sort of a promotional film for the Hare Krishna movement, rather than taking a real, not critical in the sense of criticizing, but just taking sort of an honest look. For example, if you were doing a real film about Prabhupada that wasn't just a promotional film to make all the devotees feel good, you'd have to ask questions like, well, if Prabhupada, assuming Prabhupada is this great personality, why is his movement not doing so well in first world countries? And if his movement does not do well in first world countries, what does that say about ultimately his importance in history? Now, I might answer the question the way you would, but I'm just saying, at least you raise these questions. And why isn't it doing so well in the Western world? I mean, we can live in a little sort of fool's paradise and just tell ourselves it is doing great in the Western world. Or we can, you know, have enough courage and honesty to look at the reality. And another thing is, Prabhupada himself constantly gave the argument that success is a sign of authenticity, and lack of success is the opposite. For example, Prabhupada always said that, you know, our movement is growing, our temples are full, hence we're bona fide. So if that's true, is it also true that if at a certain point the movement is not at all doing well, say in the West, in terms of real numbers, does that prove something else? I'm not leaving ISKCON. I'm just saying that we, you know, if you raise real questions like that, you start to attract intelligent people. Ironically, when you just give this nice little sort of lollipop version of it, that everything's wonderful, you know, when you produce media, either magazines or, you know, or whatever, that just say, hi, we're the Hare Krishnas, and all of us are happy all the time. And we dance through the world, giving people healthy vegetarian food. And yeah, so somehow, you know, this idea that the only way to attract people is to hide all the problems and just give this, you know, nice, we're all happy all the time. All our families are happy. So intelligent people to attract are attracted by honesty. They're attracted by honesty. They're attracted, when they see, you see, because there's always this thing in the background, like, are these people really all there? And, you know, they chanted one too many mantras or something. And, you know, I mean, a lot of people, they kind of wonder, like, yeah. So, but the easiest way to dispel any idea that we're, you know, not all there, or we're this or we're that, is just to show that we are capable of intelligent self-criticism. And as soon as you show intelligent people that you are capable of intelligent self-criticism, they trust you. They immediately trust you, and they're almost, you know, they want to help, or yeah, it's really interesting. They become interested. Yes.
Maharaj, you sort of answered my question, but I'll ask it anyway. Because so if we're sort of branching off down a new track,
fortunately, I mean, it may sound strange to say this, but fortunately, say in America, most people haven't heard of us. I mean, I never thought I would live to see the day when I would be happy to hear that most people hadn't heard of us. But there's something to be said. There's something to be said for a blank slate.
It's actually the case in New Zealand too. Quite a lot of people actually haven't heard of us. Testify to that.
Yeah, so it's a blank slate. I mean, we have this fantastic opportunity now to make the impression we want to make. So, did I answer your question, or?
I mean, I guess I sort of have a different impression in Auckland. I mean, maybe because you're out of Auckland, right? But you have quite a strong Harry Nam presence in Auckland.
Yeah.
Don't mind who sees the how you know who sees this a few hundred or 1,000 people or whatever. There's a mass of people in Auckland that many people haven't heard, and it's shocking when you get such a prize and they say I've never heard Harry people speak. Really? No, I haven't heard it. It's amazing.
Someone. Oh, Judge Sheila, did you want to?
I just did one comment to school you said earlier, which was somebody asked you Prabhupada the same question for Buddha, and that was out of many thousands, hardly one will know. Sri Prabhupada's answer was that one will be ISKCON.
Yes.
The beta thing in terms of what comes to mind for me is in any social issue when you've got between people, there's always a silver lining. And so you've got the problem or the difference. You've got the silver lining in terms of seeing it's a good part to be gleaned out of that situation. So I was just wondering, in terms of Prabhupada's idea of having devotees cooperate together and how to achieve that spiritual.
I think one of the ways to get devotees to cooperate together. I would just remind you of something else I wanted to say. I just remembered another way I wanted to agitate you, and that is one of the ways to get, let's say, reasonable devotees to cooperate. Some people are just not reasonable and they can't cooperate, but most people are reasonable. So, is that you have to let people breathe, give them room. Prabhupada, I mean, I remember ever since I was a very young devotee, Prabhupada was fighting to stop some of his disciples from sort of lording it over, bullying, or over managing other disciples. And I want to bring this into the beta discussion. See that? I'm sneaky. I found a way to do all my malicious stuff, within the topic I was given. And that is, if you look at the Bhagavad Gita, what we find is this very interesting balance between hierarchy and equality, which are opposite terms, really. And so Krishna teaches hierarchy in various ways. For example, he teaches the Chaturvarnyam, the four Varnas. That's a hierarchy. He teaches guru-disciple relationship. That's a hierarchy. He talks about, and so on and so forth. At the same time, he really emphasizes equality. Krishna says that I am equal to everyone. The word he uses, sama, English word same. Actually, like the Sindhu to Hindu and the S becomes an H, you get the Greek homo, like homogeneous, that's Sanskrit samo. Anyway, so he says, I'm equal to everyone. And then he says that you cannot achieve the highest bhakti unless you are equal to everyone. Samak sarveshu bhuteshu mad bhakting labate param. He says the wise see everyone equally. Pandita samadarshana. And on and on. So Krishna teaches hierarchies, and yet he really emphasizes there is no true enlightenment without seeing everyone equally. And so, I mean, I was giving classes in different parts of the world, trying to spread my bad reputation. And so I would raise this question. You know, when you think ISKCON or your experience of it, do you think of a society that emphasizes equality more among all the devotees, including leaders and followers, or a society which stresses hierarchy? So now what's interesting here, though, is the hierarchy is the material, the external part, and the equality is the truly spiritual part. So this is how you can judge to what extent a movement is really spiritual and not just religious, and to what extent it isn't. In ISKCON, is the impression that people get from inside, is the impression more of hierarchy, which is the bodily situation, or is it more of equality, which is the situation of souls? If your experience is more of hierarchy, we have a problem. In fact, what's interesting is that if you look at I was making this point maybe in the park, if you look at the progression from Kanishta Adhikari, which means the lowest position, that's what it means, the lowest position. Kanishta Adhikari, Madhyam Adhikari, middle position, and Uttam Adhikari, highest position. If you look at this, the more you advance, the more you don't think you're better than other people. The more you advance, the more you don't see that devotees and non-devotees are different. I mean, obviously, devotees are a different community. Krishna himself in the Gita talks about Mad Bhakta several times, my devotees. So there's a real sense in which the devotees are a special community and they associate with each other. Of course, however, for example, let's say someone in your family that you love has a contagious disease. You don't sleep in the same room with them. You don't eat at the same table with them. But at the same time, it's still your family. And you don't think you're better than someone in your family because they're sick and you're healthy. Right? I mean, what if, let's say, God forbid, let's say your brother is sick. You don't think, oh, now I'm better than him because I can beat him up because he's lying down in bed. And so, yes, devotees associate with devotees, just like you don't associate with people that have contagious diseases. And the beloved fruitive workers definitely have a contagious disease, which is materialism. That's the F-bomb, fruitive workers. At the same time, just to finish at this point, at the same time, so the qualification, for example, to be a guru, of course, the first qualification is you have to really understand Krishna and be worshiping Krishna. But one of the absolute primary qualifications of bona fide guru is that he or she does not think that they're better than other people. Because if you may think, I'm fortunate, I have this knowledge. It's like if you're a parent with a child, you don't think you're better than your child. You don't think you're better than your child. You're the parent, so you have to be the parent. You're in charge. But still, if anything, you think your child's more important. And so if someone actually thinks that I'm better than you, how can that person be an advanced guru or sannyasi or temple president or GBC? So that's the real qualification. Because if you don't think you're better, if you see the equality, then of course you honor the hierarchy, you do your duty. It's like parents, in the name of equality, don't just, let their children have an equal vote at the table. Well, I know you're only 5 years old, but we're all equal. It's in the Gita. So there are natural and necessary hierarchies, but the basis of all that, why have a hierarchy at all? The whole purpose of any hierarchy, whether it's the Varna system, whether it's the ashram system, whether it's the guru-disciple relationship, parents and children, the purpose of every hierarchy in human life is to bring everyone to the point of equality. The purpose is equality. And to get to equality, those who better understand that we're all equal have to help the others. And so therefore, in a truly spiritual society, there would be, of course, natural hierarchies. Otherwise, you can't function. But at the same time, the overriding spirit, the whole spirit and atmosphere of the society would be that we're all equal, we all respect each other. And therefore, getting back to the point of devotees fighting, I think that, like you put too many rats in the same cage, they start to, kill each other. And what Prabhupada did is, he gave everyone opportunity. If anyone, wanted to be a leader, Prabhupada, and they weren't like completely crazy, then, Prabhupada gave them opportunity. That's how I developed Latin America. That's how the South was won, Those were the days when Prabhus were Prabhus. But, so I think, is ISKCON a society where leaders are looking for followers? Or is it a society where leaders are looking for leaders? Do devotees in general in ISKCON feel that whoever is over me in terms of administrative authority is really doing everything in their power to elevate me, to get me to have more responsibility, to make me a leader? Or you more often get the impression that they want to keep me at a certain level so that I won't compete with them or I won't challenge them? I'm not answering that question because, it's none of my business in a particular place. I'm just saying, though, those are the right questions. And it would be interesting if ISKCON, like other serious corporations, or maybe I should say like serious corporations, it would be interesting if we actually did studies of this. I think it would be very interesting to find out. It'd be very interesting for the leaders to find out what percentage of devotees under them feel that that leader is dedicated to elevating them rather than dedicated to keeping them under their control. That would be a very interesting statistic to look at. Yeah. Again, I'm not answering the question. I'm not saying anything about any country. I'm just saying those are good questions to ask. Absolutely. I heard him say it many times.
Yes. I think it's correct from Mother Rumala used statistics, sociological statistics, that any society who doesn't manage to keep their mixed.
Well, actually, Burke Rochford brought that point. Yeah, but it's a general point. It's for example, the Amish are actually growing just because of their prodigious powers of procreation, and retention. I'll say a word about retention. ISKCON is out in the world. ISKCON is basically an urban society. We talk a lot about rural communities and all that, but in the real world, the overwhelming majority of devotees live in an urban or suburban environment. No. Well, no, it's an opportunity. We've made it a problem. No, but no. Yeah. Okay, well, I'm going to explain. The reason I mentioned that most devotees live in an urban or suburban, and this is practically, the farm is practically suburban now, environment, the significance of that is that we're not the Amish. We don't just shut the world out and the world's evil and we're good, and we kind of fill our kids, their heads with this stuff. So we're not, plus the Amish have an official policy not to preach. Their preaching is in the bedroom. They have a lot of kids, and not only the bedroom, they're able to keep, enough kids. But here's the point. No, I said not only the bedroom. I said that before you said it. But here's my, no, of course, obviously they have to be able to keep their kids. I said that, they also keep them. But there's a lot of isolation. But here's my point. Here's the real point I'm getting at. The real point here is that for kids that don't grow up in isolation, for Hare Krishna kids who, to a great extent, are in touch with the world, who see the world, who are part of the world, when you get to a certain age, like you're a teenager, young adolescent, and then up to your, if you know anything about developmental psychology, the most important thing for people at that age is they want to be accepted by their peers. Now, it's very well known, I mean, everyone knows this, that when the kid's just a little kid, they want it's all about their parents, they want to be with their parents. And at a certain point, like, they don't want to be with their parents, they want to be with their friends. That's normal. Not everyone, but that's the normal thing. Now, if it is the case, which a very significant number of people out there in the world look at the Hare Krishna movement as something a little bizarre and exotic, if not crazy, then that is like poison for the ISKCON youth. Because at an age when what they most want is to be respectable in the world, and they realize they cannot be so if they are identified with the religion of their parents. And I've had some of the most senior devotees, for example, in America, some of the most senior devotees tell me that if there had been something like Krishna West earlier, they could have saved their children. Yeah, so yeah. On Facebook? On this Facebook?
Yeah.
They can't hear? Oh, what he's saying. Yeah, we're talking about, I forget how we got started in this, but I think it's obvious what we're talking about, though. I mean, we're talking about, I think we have to realize the price we're paying when we are willing to publicly establish ourselves as very exotic, very different, very strange. I think we need to understand the price we're paying. You need to look at the price tag. You can't just go to the store, put something in your credit card, and never look at how much it costs, because then you can get a bill in the mail that you may not like. And so just, I think I've made that point that that's a very heavy pill to swallow for our youth. Some of them are exceptional devotees. Some of them will make it because, as I said, they're exceptional. However, for most of them, if staying in the religion of their parents means having, let's say, negatively impacting their job opportunities, I'll give you an example. There's one senior Prabhupada disciple in Germany very senior Prabhupada disciple, a very good devotee, and he worked, I don't know, he had some respectable job. I forgot exactly what it was. And everyone liked him. He was accepted. He was friends with everyone in the office. And then one time he went out on Harinam with Indian clothes, the megaphone, and led a Harinam. And one of his co-workers happened to be there, took a picture, sent it around to everyone in the office, and that was the end. He lost all his friends, and it was over. So it can actually negatively impact job opportunities. It can negatively impact marriage opportunities. It can impact your own sense of self-worth. People who don't have super self-esteem. And so and it's not only our kids. It's like one thing. Oh, I wanted to say to Yugavatar, because you brought a point earlier. I wanted to say something to a point you brought up earlier, and that is the idea that we're just concerned with the cream, that small number of people who can really get it. I made this. I think I might have made this point already in a class, and that is the idea that we only care about the very sincere people, we don't care about the insincere, I think is a catastrophic mistake. Because, you probably already heard me explain this, because the people that we are trying to attract to this movement have friends, they have family, they have colleagues, either fellow students or co-workers, And if we neglect society in general, if we do not cultivate good relations with society in general, even people we know aren't going to join us, then we will mobilize millions of people against us. Because people don't just, I mean, you get some people who are literally born devotees, according to Bhagavad Gita. I explained that in the class. They're literally born devotees. But we've kind of burned through that inventory. And so now we've actually got to persuade people. And so people in general, not people who are just like born devotees, like come hell or high water, they'll join the Hare Krishna movement, but normal people. They don't just join, they go home and someone tells their wife or tells their husband, tells their children or tells their parents, tells their friends that, yeah, I'm really interested in the Hare Krishna movement. And if they get a very negative response, if they see there will be significant damage to their network, their social network, and people emotionally, psychologically depend on their social networks. People keep themselves sane, they keep themselves happy, they keep themselves emotionally healthy within their network of relatives and friends and colleagues. And when they see that a decision to join ISKCON threatens the social network that sustains their life, that's a very high price to pay. Now, you'll get a few people who, no matter what, they're born devotees, no matter what, or you get some people who are antisocial. You get some people, I've seen it many times, who join the movement just to sort of flip the bird to their family because they're looking for a way to punish their family. They're looking for revenge, and what better way than to join the Hare Krishna? I'm not. Now, obviously, most people don't join for that reason, but I've seen quite a few join for that reason. And once they've punished their family enough, they leave ISKCON. I've seen quite a few cases. Again, it's not most devotees, but it's a number. I mean, it's definitely a category. So therefore, my point is that we absolutely need to literally neutralize society in general. We need to establish at least a neutral relationship with society in general, the quote-unquote insincere people that are not interested in Krishna consciousness. Because if we don't, those people will make very sure that most of the people who aren't interested don't actually join the movement. And I believe that's actually what's happening. I'm quite sure, because first of all, because I hear stories, if you consider how many people meet a devotee somewhere, it could be on Sankirtan, it could be at school, it could be on the job, have a sort of a favorable impression, show some interest, which is not a small number. Devotees are nice people. Some of them. And you hear stories all the time. You hear stories all the time of people who show some interest in this movement, who like it, who really like a devotee they know. And if you look at how many of those do we actually cash in, how many of those, hundreds and thousands of people actually join and are willing to tell the world, I belong to the Hare Krishna movement. I am now dedicating my life, apart from my other responsibilities. My mission in life is now to promote the Hare Krishna movement. That's what I do. And what percentage, those people who actually come and really commit, they are what percentage of all the hundreds and thousands of people who show real interest? And I think that tiny percentage of people who actually commit has everything to do with the cost of committing. It's like you can bring a good product to market. You sell produce, right? If you bring your goods to market and you mark everything up 1,000%, see how many you sell. So it's just a rule of thumb. You charge a lot. There's a very high cost for joining, and there is at the present time, because of the way we present ourselves. There's a very, very high social cost for most people for joining this movement. Yes.
I just like to sort of confirm that point. I'm not quite sure of the percentage or the statistics, but I know a lot of the people who
Maharaj, you brought up something interesting there, which I've always preached to a lot of it to my friends. ISKCON now is now a corporation, isn't it?
ISKCON is now a Prabhupada made it a corporation in
That's
'66.
right. So now in a corporation, success or failure is determined by the results. You get changed, you get taken down, you put up, you get promotions.
Okay, just for the people there, in a corporation, success or failure is determined on by how well you do.
So now, in the ISKCON paradigm, however, if you ask, I've been asking lots of my friends, what do you think of all the devotees? And they said, I would never have them as my friends. So many complaints. And then I thought about it myself.
He asked his friends, this is Yuga Avatar, asked his friends, what do you think of devotees? And most of them said, I wouldn't want them as my friends.
Yeah. And then I thought about it myself, and I thought, well, actually, probably 95% of these people that I know, they would never be my friends in the normal world. So I thought to myself.
So he said 95% of these people would not be my friends in the normal world.
So then I thought to myself, well, if the outside world thinks we're like this, and we've got this serious problem issue going on from how to solve it. And I then asked my friends, and they said, well, what we do in our corporations, because they're very successful in the world, is we create a culture, and it's based on success orientated. You get out, get something done, you get a result. And then it dawned on me that most devotees that I know don't actually do that now. They're more sedimentary. They might come along.
Sedentary.
Yeah, sorry. So I like sedimentary is a little bit more.
It's more geological, yeah.
Okay. So now most of them are in what Kamal would call from the old days moving to suburbia. That's how he.
But I think, I'd like to get at this. The fact that most devotees are sedentary, and it's a fact, we're not the most fired up thing since hot chili. But I think here's another view I have related in responding to what you said. Let's say you're on a soccer team. You say soccer in New Zealand?
They used to say football here, but now I think they're getting mixed up.
More of the evil American influence. Yeah. Anyway, so let's say you're playing that game where you kick a ball, a round ball, try to kick it into a net. Yes. So let's say you're playing and there's like 25 minutes left and you're losing 7-0. You're not really gonna like leave it all on the field. You're gonna risk serious injury, diving for a ball. It's like you can go through the motions. You can't just walk off the field. But I believe, and this is my opinion, I believe that one of the reasons for that there are not that many devotees who are like super fired up is that the movement is, in one sense, despite all the propaganda, that we're all happy, deeply demoralized. Because devotees aren't stupid. And, we've been doing certain things like you go out on the street, you chant, you dance around, you give out some pamphlets, give out some books. And when you do this year after year after year after year, and you don't see really significant growth, I think any rational human being would conclude there's not going to be significant growth. And I found with Krishna West, infomercial alert, I found that with Krishna West, one of the really positive things that happened, besides so many people hating me, one of the things that happened with Krishna West is that large numbers of devotees told me and wrote to me, and they also kind of said the same thing, that I want to get back into preaching. I think I'd like to get out there again. So it's like a team, certain sports teams, or just one second, certain sports teams are really kind of, they're just demoralized. They always lose, and they just expect to lose, and then that's what they do. That's what we do, go out there and we lose. And then you know, sometimes they'll get a new coach or a star player. Like I know I'm from Los Angeles, and the basketball team there is called the Lakers. Actually, the reason they're called the Lakers is because originally they were the Minneapolis Lakers, and Minnesota has like about 3 trillion lakes. So they were called the Lakers. And but anyway, so they got. I mean, how do I know all this? Just because gurus know everything. Anyway, so the Lakers had their glory days when they had superstars and everything. But you know, last several years they just like basically they lose. And then they traded and they got that LBJ, LeBron James, and it just picked up. Now they're winning a lot. And so, you know, when something new happens, like there's a new star on the team, or you get a new coach, and you know, and so a team which was demoralized, which just goes through the motions and always loses, can catch fire. And that's what I found with Krishna West. Large numbers of devotees said to me, I want to go out and preach again. And practically all the people in Krishna West who are actually doing centers and preaching, none of them were preaching before. I mean, they were maybe doing little, they were just living their lives. These are people that wanted to come back to preaching, and there's actually a lot of them. I mean, there's a lot of people who are just looking for engagement for them because they think, well, wait a second, maybe we could actually win. Maybe with this strategy, we could win. Because, frankly, if you take a poll of how many intelligent devotees, I mean, intelligent, educated devotees rationally believe, that if we keep going out on the street the way we're going now and doing what we're doing now, that in the near future, we're going to be like this really powerful growing movement. I mean, who believes that? Who believes that? That, you know, that hasn't happened in, you know, the last 30 years, but it's going to happen very soon. Who believes that? And what's the rational basis? What is so different now about the world? Maybe now we start polishing our cartels. You know, what is so different? I mean, it's a simple question. What is so? I mean, the devotees that go out, they're very good devotees. They're sincere. I'm sure they're going back to Godhead. I'm sure Krishna loves them. I'm not questioning their devotion, their sincerity. I'm asking a very practical question. If you say that we've done the same thing with a certain result for decades, but now in the near future, something radically different is going to happen, although we're the same and the world's the same, it just doesn't add up. It just doesn't. And so when you have a movement where the majority of devotees take for granted that we are not going to grow, we're not going to be an important movement, and everyone sort of takes that for granted. Not everyone. I'd say a very large number of devotees in ISKCON just take that for granted. So if you want to go out there for your own purification, that's nice. Or if you want to have one of those beautiful little moments where you meet someone, a chance. I mean, they're beautiful moments. Every soul is important. But if you're thinking more in terms of really making ISKCON what it used to be, a relevant, growing, dynamic movement, on what rational basis could you think that ever is going to happen if we just keep doing the same thing that hasn't made that happen for decades? And so that's why, and so therefore we can say, oh, the devotees are not, you know, they're not enthusiastic. But I think we have to just, a movement, any community, any society which is incapable of serious self-criticism or resents self-criticism or thinks that it's offensive to engage in self-criticism is a society that can only go in one direction, and that's down. If you take a course in business administration or just, you know, administration in general, a serious university course, what you find is that one symptom, important symptom of a corporation that's not making it, is that even though they have problems, if you point out the problems, then you are the problem. In other words, the problems aren't the problems. It's the person who talks about the problems who is the real problem. So with this young man here wanted to, you're Nimai, right?
No, Namruchi.
Oh, Ruchi, Namruchi.
Yeah.
That's what I meant. You just didn't understand my American accent.
My question is like, if you get an opportunity to be on devotees, they get the opportunity, or Hare Krishna school, they get the opportunity to go on TV, and a big opportunity to go on stage.
Right.
And what's the best thing to do? What's the best thing to talk about? Do you do kirtan? Do you?
Well, okay. Hope this doesn't sound sarcastic.
Did they get the question?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, if this is Namruchi,
Student at the Hare Krishna School.
student at the Hare Krishna school, up and coming young saint. And so he said, if we get an opportunity to go on television or on a stage, do a program, what do we try to communicate? Is that it?
Yeah.
Okay. This may sound like I'm not answering a question, but I really believe it's the answer. I believe that what we should try to communicate, and which maybe we can't communicate now, is that we'd like you to come and take a look at our movement, and we're confident you will feel comfortable there. We are confident that you will feel comfortable. Comfortable in the sense that you think, wow, this is nice. Because it's like sometimes what I say, well, if we could talk to important people, or if we could, maybe get on the media, and with all due respect, I don't think that's even getting near the problem. Because let's say you go up on a stage. I mean, there's all kinds of people that go on stages. Right now, it is absolute political correctness, which you violated. Practically you will be lynched, hung from the highest tree if you violate this. And that is that you have to respect world cultures. That's a huge thing right now, right? You have to respect world cultures. So if you go on the stage and you have an authentic world culture, maybe from India or Vaishnav culture, yes, you will get that respect. You will get that respect that you represent an authentic world culture, that you are enriching the world by bringing your version of culture, and so on and so forth. But one thing is, how do you get people to sort of like our presentation? Another thing is, do we have a movement that people feel comfortable with? Do we have a movement that people would like to join? And if there are things that make people feel uncomfortable, then we need to make two lists. One is, what are all the things that people may have little difficulty with, but which we absolutely can't change? Like if someone says, I don't like the Maha Mantra, then it's like tough jelly beans. It's just, that's what we do. We chant Hare Krishna. We're not going to chant something else to make you happy. But if someone is uncomfortable with things that are not absolutely essential principles, so, of course, otherwise, the simple answer to your question is chant Hare Krishna, do a nice kirtan, sing in tune, get good musicians, give a nice little talk, give them nice prasadam. Yes?
Probably needs covered it a little bit, but it seems like a healthy society. It celebrates difference.
Actually, a healthy left-wing anti-establishment society. Because you see there's all this propaganda now coming from the political correctness police to celebrate diversity. And so people have kind of been bludgeoned into submission so that everyone, respects other people's cultures. But here's an interesting statistic. Most people actually still feel more comfortable with their own people. They've been beaten over the head so much by the left that now they respect other cultures. Yeah, you have a right to exist. That's nice that you do this. But they still keep to their own kind. Here's an interesting statistic, or not, but a fact. There's a scholar in America. He teaches now at New York University, which is a prestigious school. Used to be at University of Virginia. It was also very prestigious, and he asked himself the question, he posed to himself the question, why is it that you can find good people who really hate each other on the left and the right? Like some people are, leftist, some people are conservative, and on both sides you can find nice people, but they really hate each other. So what's going on? What's driving that? So he studied it psychologically, neurologically. And he found, and he's a very well-known scholar, and he came to some very interesting conclusions. He found that, for example, what we already know, conservatives tend to value things like hierarchy, tradition, and the left tends to value things like inclusiveness and diversity. And so he compares it, but then he came to one conclusion, which I found very interesting. He said, although there's virtue on both sides and there are blind spots on both sides, he said the biggest failing of the left with their celebration of diversity, and I'll try to put it, paraphrasing him, is that they chronically, that means like all the time, they chronically underestimate the minimum level of social solidarity needed to keep a society together. In other words, in this kind of, somewhat mindless celebration of diversity, I mean, I like diversity, but it's like, what diversity are you talking about? Diversity between people that respect the law and people that break the law? The diversity between, I mean, which diversity are you talking about? And what I just said has nothing to do with race or ethnicity. The diversity of good people, decent people who respect their neighbors, yeah, that's great. That's enriching. But at the same time, here's the point. At a very deep, I want to say primitive level, and by primitive, I don't mean cavemen. I mean it goes down to our deepest neurological wiring. Every species of life, including humans, we all live in a dangerous world. The world is dangerous. And therefore, species or subspecies or communities, they have different ways of signaling each other to affirm and reaffirm that they are true to the social contract. We're sticking together. That's why when you join the army, the first thing you do is teach you this discipline and this solidarity. Because when you're out on a battlefield, your life may depend upon it, on the people around you just doing what they're supposed to do. And so, for example, in Australia, they have this wonderful phenomenon, which in itself, it makes it worth the cost of a plane ticket there, which is called swooping the birds, where there's certain kind of birds that certain season when they're, they're taking care of their young, they swoop down and start pecking your head. Oh, they have swoopers here too? Oh, yeah, it's, I have to admit, it's a kind of diversity that's really enriched my life, by coming to the South Pacific. Hey. So anyway, so I was walking with Krishna Gunn, we were taking a walk out in the country near New Govardhan, and I noticed, because there were some birds there, they didn't swoop us because we weren't going fast enough, but they started signaling each other. So animals of the same herd or the same kind, they signal. And as far as we know, the birds don't necessarily understand exactly what they're doing, but they respond. They know what the signals mean. And human beings signal each other. And this is, and they don't know what they're doing necessarily. No problem.
I have to go because I have an appointment, but I had a question, so I'm asking my wife.
Oh, sure. Be happy to address that.
Thank you very much.
Sure. So what I'm saying is that there are certain ways that human beings signal each other without knowing that's what they're doing, that you can trust me. I'm there for you. We're a society. Such as, for example, dress code. There are certain forms of dress that just send out a signal, I respect the law. And there are certain forms of dress that say, I don't respect this society. I do not respect this society. Oh, maybe we could give that out. Oh, it's for her. Oh, of course, feed her. Yes. I thought we were going to pass around. Yeah. So, and there are certain ways of dressing that send out the signal that I think the society, I can't stand it. I don't give a damn what you think. I'm not there for you. And so what you have is, you have now what is called identity politics. In other words, you are your body. You are a white male, or you are a white female, or you're a non-white male or non-white female. You are your sexual orientation. You are your body. And therefore, you're either a victim, even if no one ever victimized you, the mere fact that you have a certain kind of body means that you have a right to victimhood, even if no one's actually bothering you. And if you're, say, like a white male or some other creature like that, that's the worst thing to be. Then even if you're actually not abusing anyone, you still have original sin and collective guilt. And the only reason you achieved anything in your life is because you belong to a privileged class. No matter what you've done in your life, you didn't earn it. And so as many people are pointing out, there's this balkanizing, this pitting of everyone like body types against each other. And let's say people don't even go to some of the absurd extremes of the people that perpetrate identity politics. If you just celebrate diversity and you never celebrate unity and you never celebrate solidarity and you never celebrate a common culture, over time, basically your society disintegrates. And so with this scholar who's coming from the left, I think he's an atheist also, but what he found is that there's a strong tendency on the left to underestimate, to ignore minimum necessary levels of solidarity, the minimum levels required to actually keep a society going. And so if you have unlimited diversity, how does, and you don't happen to be one of the few people that just loves anyone that's different from my group. The very fact you're different means you're a good person. And the very fact that you're from my group means you're a bad person. So that's why the message I want to send out, frankly, when I walk down the street, is that I'm a respectable, law-abiding member of society, and you can trust me, and let's talk about Krishna. That's the message I want to send out. I don't want to send out the message that I'm weird, I'm strange, I'm very different, I'm exotic. Now, some people, even if they're not exotic, they exoticize themselves, either by body piercing or whatever. Some people, that's their sweet spot, being very exotic and being different from everyone else. And if that's what works for someone, have a great life. And if we were just free individuals, everyone could just please themselves. But if we're trying to be a mainstream spiritual movement, if we're trying to attract respectable Western people, we don't attract in very big numbers. If you look at the publications of our Western outreach programs, clearly targeting, sort of young people who are not in the mainstream. And so that's my simple point. And just one last thing, and that is, I'm really inspired by this verse in the Bhagavatam, describing the Vaishnava, Titikshava. They're tolerant, Karunika, they're merciful, Suhradak Sarvadehinam. And they're the well-wishers of all conditioned souls. Now, therefore, the cultural space I want to be in New Zealand, in America, wherever else I go, is in the center. I want to be in the cultural center. I mean, obviously, if I wear Indian clothes, I am tilting toward Indians and Indophiles, people that think that India is cool or Indian things are cool. I'm making it much easier for them to approach me, and I'm leaning away from people that don't feel that way. So in other words, I'm not being equal to everyone. I am favoring one small group in society. Or if I go out there and I'm just, freaky or whatever I am, So I want to be in the center. I want to be equidistant to all the major segments of the society I'm in. I want to be equal. I want to give everyone the same fair chance. And there is actually a cultural center. For example, the way I'm dressed, and if you are interested, if you like what I'm wearing, go just HDG dressingtips.org. Just kidding. Yeah. So just to wrap up here, the way I'm dressed, I could be a Christian, I could be Jewish, I could be a Buddhist, I could practice yoga, I could be a leftist person, I could be a right-wing person, I could be a doctor, I could be a lawyer, I could be anything. It's just neutral, respectable dress. And that's exactly what Prabhupada said to me personally. He personally said to me in Honolulu in 1974, you do not have to wear Indian clothes. He personally said that to me. Just be a gentleman. So this is sort of casual, kind of guru casual. So that's what I wanted. To me, that's how I understand the Bhagavatam statement. I want to be in the cultural center where I can reach out to everyone, not just to this group, not that I lean toward one group and lean away from another. To me, that is not the way you show that you're equal to everyone. So you've been trying for some time to... Gopis. Marxist gopis.
Krishna may still appreciate your particular way of serving him or attracting particular types of personality according to the way you dress or the way you talk. Prabhupada, surely he embraced both.
Of course.
He embraced both. He liked it if they wore devotional clothes and would probably really enjoy seeing some of the presentations. But he would also equally...
Blessed are the peacemakers. But just one point though. But there's actually something Prabhupada liked even more, and that is saving the fallen souls. And if Prabhupada became convinced, as he sometimes did, that a particular strategy was actually an obstacle to spreading this movement, he would adjust it. So, for example, it's very famous, everyone knows, that Prabhupada stopped the Harinam Sankirtan in India at a certain point because people were misunderstanding. People were misunderstanding, so he stopped it. So, yeah, I agree with you. Obviously, everyone has a right to serve Krishna according to their own inspiration. At the same time, if it's true, and I'll just put it as hypothetical, if it's true that a particular strategy or a particular style is a serious impediment to saving this planet, then it's no longer on the basis of respecting individual preference. It's about getting the job done. So, again, I'm putting that hypothetically, but I think we should at least keep that in mind as a possibility. Yes. And then actually at 4 o'clock, we're supposed to call Wellington and ask them why they have so many hills in their city. Yes.
So my husband's question was, and I'm going to sort of elaborate a little bit on it, because I think you've really answered it, but maybe it's just a sort of devil's advocate question. But in this country, a long time ago, when Prabhupada was still on the planet, the movement sort of divided into the Hare Krishnas and the Hare Bols, and you may have heard of the history. And the Hare Bols were sort of more Krishna West.
Right.
They used all the different instruments, and they wore Western clothes, and they said to Prabhupada that, people don't like those clothes. So he said, well, we don't, I don't know the exact words, but something about we don't really care what the public thinks. We're not trying to please the public.
Okay.
We're trying to please Krishna.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, okay, I'll answer that.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's good to.
Oh, that's
the
fine.
argument is very plausible.
Yes.
But it's good to
No, that's fine.
all the arguments, isn't it?
I still like you. Yes. So,
Sorry?
You just add on to this for a second, because that's when I joined. There was 200 going down one.
okay, yeah, but okay. So, 2 points I would make. Number one, as far as I know, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't claim to be an expert on this, but as far as I know, the Hari Bols were not presenting themselves in a very mainstream, respectable way.
I should actually, that bit was not my husband's question. I elaborate.
Okay.
As an example.
But at least back then, I mean, now they have a lot of, successful.
So maybe we should forget the Harry Bowl.
Okay.
Just a bit about Prague.
Okay. Let's do the bit about Hari. Yeah, 'cause I had nothing against the Hari Bols. I mean, I myself chant Hari Bol. As far as what Prabhupada said, they have this saying in Brazil that don't mess with the team that's winning. Like if your team is winning, don't start changing things. No mexe com o time que está ganhando. So when Prabhupada made that statement, ISKCON was booming all around the world. So the point is, maybe some people don't like it, but we're winning. It's working. To think that Prabhupada would say the same thing when the movement is collapsed is just a remnant of what it used to be. And it's not at all. It's just, everything is just drastically reduced. I think it's absurd to say that Prabhupada would give the same answer. And Prabhupada in so many ways cared what people thought. When the devotees first went back to India, Prabhupada, he went out of his way to adjust all kinds of things so that Indian people wouldn't be disturbed. Prabhupada, you have statements from Prabhupada saying, do not do anything to lessen our opinion in the public's eyes. And so you can take one statement, but I mean, everyone that's an adult should know how dangerous it is to take one statement from Prabhupada. Because I can show you 100 statements from Prabhupada where he says exactly the opposite. And so, to say that there was something which Prabhupada himself called a dead thing. Prabhupada said, dress is a dead thing. That's a direct quote. We do not care about dress. We are interested in consciousness, living consciousness. Prabhupada, I've given pages and pages and pages of quotes of Prabhupada saying the opposite. So therefore, since Prabhupada kind of is all over this issue, the question is, which instruction or which set of instructions from Prabhupada are needed now? Which instructions from Prabhupada are going to save this movement and make this movement a contender again on the waterfront? Marlon Brando, taxi cab scene, contender. Anyway, so what? That's a classic. No. If you take an acting class today in Los Angeles, you'll have to study that scene. So that's what I'm saying. Since we have a huge number of quotes from Prabhupada saying that we should, here's a quote from Prabhupada, you should make all adjustments so that Krishna consciousness is comfortable for Western people. It's convenient for them. Make all adjustments. That's in his Bhagavatam purport, 4054. Take all risks, make all adjustments so that this process is convenient, comfortable for Western people. That's Prabhupada. So it's interesting. If you come to a rational conclusion, if you want to actually try to make this movement grow, then you favor those quotes. But if you just want to do this old bravado, like, let the karmis eat boga, like eat shak, Lord Chaitanya's favorite vegetable. It's, what kind of mentality is that? That when you see Prabhupada's movement, just a fragment of what it was, and you still want these big, comments. No, we don't give a damn what they think. Yeah, Prabhupada cared very much. Therefore, you see in Prabhupada's life, every time his strategy wasn't working, he changed his strategy. When in Prabhupada's life did he go on year after year after year doing the same thing when it wasn't working? He went to Jhansi. He put all his energy in Jhansi, and then it fell through. So he went to Delhi, started selling his Back to Godhead sheet. That didn't work. He went to Vrindavan, did the Bhagavatam. He gave the Bhagavatam out to important people, including the Prime Minister of India. But that wasn't happening. He came to America. He went to Butler, Pennsylvania. And if you read the biography, he was just in Butler. It's not like when he first got there, he first said, well, I'm not going to stay here. He was in Butler. And then he saw it's too small. So he went to New York. He was with Dr. Mishra. And for a time, that was the plan. But then that wasn't working. Then he got a loft. If you look at Prabhupada's life, you see him constantly rejecting strategies that don't work and adopting new strategies. In fact, ISKCON is plan B. ISKCON is plan B, the way it is. Plan A, just read the biography. Read all the letters Prabhupada wrote, preparing for his journey to America. Read all the letters he wrote when he was alone in America, appealing to big people, famous foundations, Carnegie Foundation, Ford Foundation, influential people. That was plan A. Attract important, influential people to ISKCON. But no one responded. A few kind of hippie counterculture, like sort of Latter-day Beatniks, showed up in Manhattan, and then they started coming. So he shifted to plan B. He started the In God We Trust political party. I remember walking with Prabhupada every day. That's all he wanted to talk about. That's all he wanted to talk about. That was the program, the In God We Trust party. And the boys got into it, and then he saw there were unintended consequences, and so he just stopped it, and he went somewhere else. He made his world headquarters in Los Angeles. He declared, this is my world headquarters. I'm going to sit here and write. In 1970, Prabhupada declared he was going to stop traveling. He was going to stay in LA. Great weather, by the way. If you look up Los Angeles and Veda Base, most of the things Prabhupada says about it are great weather. Anyway, so that was the plan. In fact, I remember in 1970, because I went down to see Prabhupada. He called for me, actually. You know that story? You heard what I was doing. Prabhupada said, who is this boy? He has a transcendental brain. Prabhupada said that. So he asked me to come and see him. So I went. Anyway, so in those days, Prabhupada, if you know the Los Angeles temple, what are now all the pujari rooms, behind the deities, that was Prabhupada's darshan room. Prabhupada would go, he would go for his walk, and then he would go up to his room for breakfast, and after breakfast, he would come down, no one would go upstairs to Prabhupada's room. He would come down there, and he wanted all the leaders from around the world to visit him periodically, and he would stay in LA, he would write his books, and people would visit him. And that was the plan. That was Prabhupada's plan. And then what happened is that there was that whole thing with the four sannyasis and the Gaudiya Math conspiracy to take over ISKCON. Prabhupada felt he needed the home court advantage. He wasn't safe there. He went back to India. And then the whole Indian movement started. And so if you look at Prabhupada constantly adjusting, constantly shifting, tremendous versatility, agility, never staying with the plan that's not working. And so for anyone that actually knows Prabhupada, is not just kind of like sort of a mindless parrot. As Prabhupada said, you don't repeat the words of the Guru like a parrot. You ignore history, you ignore social science, you ignore the details of Prabhupada's life, and if you think that if Prabhupada came back and saw the remnants of his Western movement, he would say, don't change anything, just do exactly the same thing. I think that's madness. I can hardly believe that anyone, no one who actually knows Prabhupada would ever say that. If Prabhupada saw the condition of his Western movement, he would call us. I know exactly what he would do. He would call us, senior people, and he would say, we have to fix this. How can we fix this? What can we do? And if I said, well, just do exactly the same thing we're doing now. Don't change anything. It's been this way, Prabhupada, for about 20 or 30 years, but don't change anything. Prabhupada would think I was crazy. So, it's not a question of disrespecting other devotees, not a question of disliking them. But, my point is Prabhupada right now needs us to be adults. It's like you take over the family store, your father's store, and, in times of change, you say, well, no, we got to do things exactly the same way. This is the way Dad did it. Yeah, but store's going bankrupt. If you love your father, you make the store work. So to me, and considering that Gaudiya Vaishnava history is a history of adaptation, to me, Prabhupada is crying out to us, do something, change this, fix this, get this movement back on track, make this movement powerful again. We have to be contenders. We have to be relevant, a powerful, relevant, growing Western movement. That's what I hear Prabhupada saying. And so I'm trying my best. And I'm leaving in a couple of days, so probably before there can be a formal attempt to get rid of me. But oh, by the way, we're supposed to call Wellington, aren't we?
Well, she's too shy to go on the internet. She doesn't want to be broadcast. She texted me.
So she's not going to be broadcast.
What's that?
She's not going to be broadcast.
Oh, really?
Oh, thank
Well,
you.
she's happy to do private Skype, but she.
Okay, tell her. Why don't you tell her that in a couple hours we'll talk. What about were there other people there that want? Or they can watch
No,
this.
it's just her and her husband.
Okay, tell her.
If you wanted to talk to the bigger group there, she can organize.
Okay, tell her in a couple hours we'll talk to her. Once you text her that. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for coming. Hare Krishna, thank you for coming. Yes.
Maharaj, you were talking about how
Okay, maybe we'll wrap this up. So get your very large donations ready, and don't forget that it may put your children or families in danger, but Krishna will give it back to you many times over. Yes.
You're saying about how it's natural for people that like each other, similar to each other, to
Yes.
attract each other, and also purpose-driven church mentions that point. In our movement now, our majority is Indian people in this country that have become devotees and got initiated.
Yeah.
So the question is there a way of engaging the Indian devotees to preach to Western
Okay. I think that the Indian devotees are excellent devotees. They're as much a part of our family as anyone else. They're not doing anything wrong. They're wonderful people. They're not the problem. What we need to do is there is an Indian community and there is a Western community, and of course we're all the same family. We know that. The Indian people, frankly, would love nothing better than to see us be respectable in this country. Because you have to understand what the typical immigrant psychology is. When someone comes from another country, especially when they're coming from a country which is not as respected by, I'm not saying that it shouldn't be respected, but it's a third world country coming to a first world country. And so what they want more than anything, in a sense, is to be respected in that society. They want their children to be respected in school. They want to, and so the greatest gift we could give the Indian immigrants in New Zealand is to have a respectable Western Hare Krishna movement. And ironically, if we did that, we'd get a lot more Indians too. Because don't forget Prabhupada's strategy. Prabhupada's whole strategy for India was to show that it works in the West. Because India is following the West. India's got talent, air-conditioned shopping malls. India is following the West. And so as successful as the movement is among Indians, and it is successful, if we actually were really successful in the West, we would probably get 10 times more Indians. So rising tide lifts all boats, as they say.
So is it with the Indians that we have as devotees now to try to train them to preach the Western?
No. You could, sure. Of course, if they feel inspired to do that, of course they can do it. It's free for everyone. There's no racial requirement. But our general experience has been, not always, but that Western people are able to preach to Western people. It's just like the Indians bring in more Indians. They have their program. They're nice devotees. The idea that they should do our work, I think, is part of the problem. My vision of these temples that have mostly Indian congregations is just appreciate them and get out of their way. Just let them be happy and do what they do for Krishna. But the idea that they should do the Western preaching too, and what are we going to do? What's our service? And what's that? And in general, there are some exceptional preachers from an Indian background who are really great preachers, but I would say in most cases it doesn't work that well. And I don't see why we can't just let them do what they're doing. So, yes, last question.
So creating, a place where people can come and all that sort of thing, according to Christian Western type mode. What about deity worship? Would you sort of leave that on one side, or how would you sort of incorporate that? Or down the track of it?
I would say this is just my own practical view. There has to be worship. I mean, we have to have an altar. We have to chant Hare Krishna. Because the whole point is I'm actually very conservative about what we do. As far as the style we do it, I'm very liberal. But as far as what we do, I'm very conservative. I think we should just chant Hare Krishna, explain Bhagavad Gita, and give people healthy prasadam. And so as far as, have pictures. I think deity worship is, I don't think it's necessary for what we're trying to do. I'm not saying we shouldn't have deities. I mean, we all love the deities. We all go to see the deities. But I think for Western people, I don't think that deity worship is really, that's our secret weapon for Western people. Look, we have idols. It's and plus it takes a lot of work. People have to, and so what you find. So I think we have to just focus on. Prabhupada once said to me, actually, I'll tell this to you. Prabhupada said this to me just the day after he made me GBC of Latin America. And he just said, I didn't ask him anything. He just said to me, he said, for the more advanced devotees, there is knowledge, basically, writing books, reading books, distributing books, distributing knowledge. He said, let the others build temples and worship the deities. Prabhupada actually said that to me. I'm not against deity worship. We all love the deities and we all appreciate those who worship them. But the point is, Prabhupada said, I mean, it's in the Bhagavatam that, the Bhagavad Gita, it's also in the Bhagavatam. The Gita, Krishna says, Shreyan dravyamaya dyagya jnana dyagya. Better than serving Krishna by paraphernalia. Dravya means paraphernalia, like material things, like, incense, ghee lamps. That's dravya. The things we offer in arti. And Krishna says, better than offering that is serve me through knowledge. He actually says it's better. They're not, sorry, I know you're the peacemaker, but they're not just equal. One is better. And of course, I mean, you can have someone who worships deity who's a pure devotee, so it's not, but in general, Krishna says Shreyan, which means better. Better than the Dravya Maya Jagya, serving Krishna through Dravya, paraphernalia, is serving him through knowledge. Because the real goal is knowledge. And I don't want ISKCON to become the religion that I left to join ISKCON. I remember when we all joined Hare Krishna movement, people said, well, what about your religion, you were born to? We all said, no, it's like rituals and, I don't want ISKCON to become the religion I left to join ISKCON. That's the basic point. So if we have temples where the main thing is deity worship, then we're a Kanishta society. Someone's got to just like lay it out on the line. What's that great song from the George Harrison, that line from the George Harrison song? You can bring a horse to water. You can have it all laid out in front of you, but it don't make you think. If the center of our temples, I mean, of course the deities are the center because that's, so to speak, Sanctus Sanctorum, the Holy of Holies. I mean, of course the deities are. However, if the main activity in our temples is deity worship, we are Kanishta Adhikaris. Because that's what Prabhupada said. Prabhupada said there's Bhagavad Vidhi and there's Pancharatrik Vidhi. And he said Bhagavad Vidhi is more important. We do both. He said our temples are just bases from which we go out to give people knowledge. And to keep the preachers strong, we worship Krishna. Sincerely worship the deity. So if we flip Prabhupada's vision, if we invert Prabhupada's own vision, and temples just exist to do deity worship, and in order to pay for the deity worship, we do little preaching. So we can get some funds to keep the deity worship going, or expand the deity worship, or install new deities, then we've actually stood Prabhupada's whole vision on its head.
You don't even have classes at this school anymore.
No comment.
Sorry, what was the last question?
No classes at festivals. Yeah, I mean, ISKCON is primarily meant to be a movement that teaches people, gives knowledge. That's the main point. We are a society based in knowledge. I mean, just think, I mean, let's just consider a few points. For every good school ISKCON builds, it builds 10 temples. How much money does ISKCON spend on rituals and temples? How much money does ISKCON spend on schools?
Surely about knowledge is back so realms of deity worship. I mean, it can also be back without being a peacemaker.
No, I appreciate that you're a peacemaker.
But actually, bhakti, I would say the goal is knowledge, but that may lead one to bhakti. It's the bhakti yoga.
No, it's not jnana. It's not jnana yoga. It's philosophy with religion. Krishna says in that famous Gita verse 10:10, Teshang satata juktanam vajatang priti pur. For them, Krishna says, Tesham, for them, satata juktanam, we're always engaged. Bhajatam, worshiping, priti purvakam, with real love. Krishna says, Dadami, I give them something by which they come to me. So what does Krishna give those people by which they come to him? Buddhi yoga. The practice, the spiritual practice of rational intelligence. And the point is, you cannot attract intelligent people to this movement if you don't give them an intelligent explanation. You have to give them knowledge. And if you convince them, yes, then they'll open their hearts. Intelligent people don't open their hearts when they're not convinced, when you haven't shown them that this makes sense. And Prabhupada made very clear, and this is just sociology 1A, that if we don't attract intelligent people, this movement will not make it. Prabhupada was concerned way back, as he said, that many people are joining this movement, and so many of them are Sudras, not Brahmins. That's a quote from Prabhupada. I mean, we want to save everyone. It's not that, we don't care about everyone. But strategically, unless we attract the intelligent people, ISKCON will not make it. And you cannot attract, Prabhupada, the first instruction Prabhupada ever gave me personally. I joined the movement in 1969. I was like 1 year old. It's amazing. I literally just crawled into the temple. Anyway, so when I joined, I was a student at Berkeley. I had a scholarship at Berkeley. And so I wrote Prabhupada and asked, should I stay in the university or just drop out and, go on Sankirtan or whatever. Prabhupada wrote back to me and said, stay in school. He said, I want you to have a good education so that you can preach to similarly educated people. He didn't say, just read my books. I mean, of course I read his books. But he said, you need a good education to preach to educated people. So how can we bring valuable people to bhakti? How can we bring the intelligent class to bhakti if we don't make a very intelligent presentation? Not about, hobgoblins flying around the sky and attacking the right hands of Brahmins, but bouncing off their left hands when they're chanting Gayatri mantra. It's not Harry Potter. It's a spiritual science. Yes.
say? Because you say to persuade them.
Well, I mean, there's say something like really nice, like, "Have I got a deal for you? Step right up. You look like a smart cookie." Something kind of cultured like that. No, you could. I would. First of all, I would talk to the person. I would maybe make an initial statement like, "This is a book of great wisdom," and then see what they say, because everyone's different. You have to talk to that person. So I'd say one of the main things is maybe say one thing and see how they react. They say, "No, I don't believe in wisdom," and I would say, "Well, is that wisdom? Not to believe in wisdom?" Or or they say, "Yeah, I've been looking for something," or "I already have my religion." You've got to listen to people. That's the thing. It can't be the Hare Krishna monologue. It has to be a dialogue. So I would say the more you really are interested in them, you really like people, they'll be interested in you. I mean, the most charming thing in the world for people is that you like them. Yes.
With the incredible shallowness of the world today, it's not like it was even in the 60s.
Of course.
So I've just found in the preaching that I've been doing the last few years that the more that I teach people how to think, the more that I try and teach them how to think about Krishna, the more success I've had with all ages of people. Because I'm trying to take responsibility for teaching them how to think first, for which they're grateful, and then they're willing to hear about Krishna.
I mean, I'm sure I do the same thing because I go through all this logic stuff and everything. So, yeah, but I mean, you're sincere, you're intelligent, and I would say that just, if you really care about each person and talk to that person, and and if the person sees you're really interested in them, because if a person feels you're interested in selling something, then but if they see that you genuinely like them or interested in them, "Hey, how are you?" And you're like a nice person, and this is what I'm doing. These are really amazing books of wisdom, and this could really bring something to your life. And then see what they say, and then just talk to them. That's what I would do.
And I also wanted to add that I have also, when I go out and do this, so many people, even in this country, who haven't heard about the Hare Krishna movement, which I was also surprised, or maybe not. But
That's
they haven't heard of the Hare Nam as well. They haven't, and the some who have, even students.
yeah. No, so we have a great chance, blank slate. We can tell our story the right way. Good old Harriet.
Just to go back to what you were saying when someone started questioning you, what is that man doing inside Councilman's brain? What were you doing?
What was I doing? The Isa Upanishad had just come out. The Isa Upanishad was the first ISKCON book published that actually had a guide for chanting Sanskrit, had diacritic marks. That was the first book, the Isa Upanishad. Because we just have the Macmillan Gita, it didn't have Sanskrit. And the TLC, of course, didn't have it. So when I saw it, I was ecstatic. I remember we were out in front of the campus in Berkeley doing Harinam or whatever we were doing, selling magazines. And Temple President, drove up in this old car and just and in those days, ISKCON Press, that was before the BBT, ISKCON Press would just send a case or two of books to all the temples, and they just had to sell them and send the money in. And so he came in, he just dropped off a case of these books, and we opened it, and it was Isa Upanishad. When I saw it, I just loved it so much. It was like love at first sight, the Sanskrit and everything. And so I don't know, 15 or 20 minutes, I sold half the case. I was always like the Sankirtan, before there was a Sankirtan competition. So I just sold, and then what I did, I started chanting the mantras, and I would teach the devotees to chant the mantras. I think I was definitely, I was the first disciple of Prabhupada that started following him and actually quoting Sanskrit verses. Like Prabhupada always quotes the verses. So I was doing that. I was practically the only one. And so when Prabhupada heard I was doing that, I was quoting the Sanskrit, and I was teaching the devotees the verses and everything. That's when he said, "Who is this boy? He has a transcendental brain." He said, send him to me and I will give him special instructions. So then it was like kind of like it was a big buzz in ISKCON back then because I was just a brahmachari. I'd been at that point. I'd been in the movement about 7 months. I'd been in the movement 7 months, and so our temple president had gone down to see Prabhupada in L.A. And he came back and said, Prabhupada wants to see you. Prabhupada asked for you, and they told me that story. And so I went down to see Prabhupada, and he was really, really happy.
Were you studying language?
No, I was a crazy 20-year-old. No, I was 21 by then. I was mature. So, yeah, Prabhupada was just it's funny because he had, in those days, I still remember that we would, after, we would go down after the morning program, we would go into Prabhupada's darshan room, which is a beautiful room. Now it's the Pujari room. This is a beautiful room. And Prabhupada personally actually chose the colors for the walls and everything. It was just really beautiful. It was really beautiful blue color with and some of the paintings from the Krishna book were on the walls. I mean that was in 1970, and in just 7 or 8 months before that, before I joined the movement, I went home. I was at Berkeley, and so which is Northern California. I went home for the summer I was living in Beverly Hills, my family, and I didn't know it, but Prabhupada was actually living a few blocks from me and doing the Krishna boat. So Prabhupada did the Krishna boat. He's living in my neighborhood. I didn't even know it. But so anyway, so then I went to see Prabhupada, and his system was that after the morning program, all the leaders of the world would come to see Prabhupada from different places. They would come into his room, and Prabhupada sat in a vyasa, sort of a low seat, and then the devotees would sit around him in a half circle. And Prabhupada started at the left, and they just would go to each person, sort of transact the business, like, what was going on in your part of the world, and he would just deal with everything and just go right around. And so when he came to me, I wasn't a leader. I was just a brahmachari. And my face was almost cracking with my smile. I was just so happy to be there with Prabhupada. I'd been in the movement 7 months or something. I couldn't believe it. And so Prabhupada saw me. It's funny because there was nothing to talk to me about in terms of leadership because I wasn't a leader. So he just looked at me and he said, so, you are happy? I said, yes, Prabhupada. He said, you are liking this Krishna consciousness? I said, yes. So then he was like, then he looked around the room like, hey, the kids, the little kid's not bad. And so then he said, and then he wanted to hear me chant the Sanskrit. He loved the fact that it was like finally one of his disciples, the first time, was actually like quoting Sanskrit like him, and all that. And so, to Prabhupada's right, there was this nice bookcase with the glass enclosed, and so he told Gargamuni, get out. Well, I think it was Isopanchad, get out the Isopanchad. So Gargamuni got it out, and then he said, Prabhupada said, give it to him. So he gave me the book, and then Prabhupada said, chant. So I opened to the first verse and I chanted. And that's when Prabhupada really smiled. He looked around the room like, hey, look what the little kid has done. And so Prabhupada had the book passed around to all the devotees in the room and had each one of them chant a mantra, and then he chanted one. Actually, the last thing I want to say before I ask you all for donations and loans is, hey, come on back. What's your name again? Oh my God, this is the third time I've asked you. Sorry. But I know you. You're a really good girl. So I'll tell you a really nice story about Prabhupada. I'm glad you came back for this. And that is, in my mind, well, first of all, let's look at Krishna Lila. Krishna Lila, of course, begins in Vrindavan. And then Krishna goes to Mathura and Dwarka. And so, just like in Chaitanya Lila, there's Adi, Madhya, and Antya Leelas, there also is in Krishna Lila, although it's not called that. So Adi Lila for Krishna's Vrindavan. And then Madhya Lila is when Krishna personally goes out and is fighting. He's fighting battles, killing demons. And then at the end of the Krishna book, the 10th canto, Krishna actually stops personally fighting. And he turns over that duty to the Pandavas. So if you compare the timelines for the Bhagavatam 10th canto and the Mahabharata, the 10th canto actually ends somewhat early in the Mahabharata. Because Mahabharata is dealing more with the Pandavas, and Krishna turns over those fighting duties to the Pandavas. So, so then Krishna and Balaram personally don't fight. That's why Balaram didn't even come to the battle of Kurukshetra, and Krishna just drove the chariot. So Chaitanya Leela exactly parallels that. Because Antya Leela, Lord Chaitanya in Navadvip, that's Vrindavan. He's with his own family, his own friends, everyone knows him, it's very intimate. And just as Krishna leaves and goes out to change the world, because in Vrindavan, those are the most intimate pastimes, but they didn't have much geopolitical significance. In fact, Krishna, he killed these demons sent by Kamsa, but even to kill Kamsa, he actually left Vrindavan. So Krishna leaves Vrindavan to set the world in order. So first, this is typically you find in Krishna's incarnations. First in Vrindavan, very intimate pastimes. You sort of see Krishna as he really is at home. Then he goes out to fulfill the purpose of his incarnation and fixes the world. And then, after he's fixed the world for a while, he retires and lets his devotees do it. And you get the exact same thing in Chaitanya Leela. First Navadvip, Vrindavan, which means intimate, with his friends and family, very sweet pastimes, but a very little historical significance. Then, to get the world in order, Lord Chaitanya leaves. He leaves Navadvip and goes out and for 6 years travels around and establishes a powerful Hare Krishna movement all over Bharatvarsha. Having done that, just as Krishna retires from fighting, Lord Chaitanya retires from active traveling and preaching, just goes back to Jagannath Puri and is with his devotees. And so my point here is that you find the same structure in Prabhupada's pastime. And what I'm about to say, I think, is extremely relevant to what we're trying to do in Krishna West, as I'll try to show you. Are you ready? Bring it on. So, in one sense, his devotees, it's very common to think of the golden age of ISKCON as the Hare Krishna explosion, as opposed to the Hare Krishna implosion. But the Hare Krishna explosion, when the movement was booming and we were selling millions and millions of books and people were joining and temples opening, and there's truth in that. However, for me, in a sense, the sweetest, or the golden age was before that. Because just one more thing, if you look at Krishna in Vrindavan, even though Krishna, his Vrindavan Leela, didn't have direct geopolitical importance the way his later pastimes did, those are the pastimes that show Krishna most intimately. And if you look at Indian history, those are the pastimes that most attracted people to Krishna. So the fact that Krishna is so important in Indian history is almost entirely because of his Vrindavan pastimes. And then, of course, Bhagavad Gita. So my thesis is, I've always got an argument, right? My mother said I'd be a good lawyer. Anyway, my thesis is that if you look at Prabhupada from, let's say, 1966 to about 1970, that's actually the Vrindavan Leela, in the sense that, first of all, Prabhupada practically knew all his disciples and they all knew him. So the relationship with Prabhupada was intimate. Everyone knew each other. Secondly, ISKCON was not so hierarchical. It wasn't like these big, heavy leaders that tell you what to do about everything. It was much more collegial. We were just all friends. Third, there was no sense in the ISKCON I joined. Up until about 1972. The first 3 years I was in the movement, up till 1972, and certainly before I joined in 69, there was no sense in ISKCON that I can remember that women were less than men. There was no sense that women are Maya, or something. It just didn't exist. I joined the temple in Berkeley, and we were just all brothers and sisters. And that's exactly how we saw each other. And I can't remember anyone ever making a derogatory remark about women in the Hare Krishna movement. And then Prabhupada personally sent me to Boston. And to work on his books. And that was the biggest temple in the world back then because ISKCON Press was there. And again, there was just the idea that women are somehow less than men, or that, women are somehow Maya. It didn't exist. It just didn't exist. And that was the biggest temple in the world. And so, in terms of the relationship with Prabhupada, Prabhupada was obviously revered, but not mythologized. If you read Mukunda Goswami's book, which I think is one of the best books I've read, I think it's really an important book. If you read Mukunda Goswami's book on Prabhupada, what you find is that Prabhupada was definitely the absolute authority for, Krishna consciousness, but in terms of practical things like how to spread the movement, Prabhupada's disciples took the lead. They were Americans. They figured out how to spread the movement in America. So, for example, like Mukunda, it's amazing. I mean, he found the property in 26 Second Avenue. He told Prabhupada, this is a good place to be. And they went to San Francisco. And Prabhupada, and then they told Prabhupada, you need to come to San Francisco. It's happening on the West Coast now. If this movement's going to really be relevant, we have to be on the West Coast. So he went there. And then they told Prabhupada about the peace movement. So then he did the peace formula. So you find Prabhupada completely happy to just be the spiritual leader of ISKCON, and happy to have his disciples figure out how to spread the movement. And then when the movement grew very explosively and some devotees started doing really dumb things, because Prabhupada wasn't there all the time, Prabhupada had to get more involved in the management, and he bitterly complained about it. Prabhupada was constantly saying, get me out of here. I don't want to manage. I just want to write books. You guys manage. So this image of Prabhupada is someone who really, he came to give us every practical tip on exactly what to do, how to dress this and that. No, he bitterly complained. He was constantly complaining when he got dragged into the management. And he was much happier when his disciples just figured it out. So in my view, Prabhupada, if you look at Prabhupada in the early days of the movement, it's such an intimate, sweet, beautiful relationship with Prabhupada. I mean, you see, for example, Janaki, who was Mukunda's wife then. And Prabhupada's flying off from New York to San Francisco, and Janaki doesn't want Prabhupada to leave, so she just steals his plane ticket. And you see a picture where she's holding out his plane ticket. It's like, I'm not going to let you travel. And Prabhupada is just laughing and laughing. I mean, that's the kind of relationships they had. And so then, just as Krishna left Vrindavan, less intimate pastimes, but to kind of fix the world. So then you have this huge Sankirtan movement and book distribution. ISKCON became sort of militarized. The role of women went down. The hierarchy became more became more steep. Suddenly leaders just bossing people around. Most of Prabhupada's disciples never once had a conversation with him. And so you get this sort of mythologizing of Prabhupada. I mean, we should glorify Prabhupada as a pure devotee sent by Krishna. Prabhupada personally told me privately that there was never a time when he didn't know Krishna. Prabhupada personally told me that privately. So I think I understand who Prabhupada is. But you can mythologize him. So that suddenly, in a way that Prabhupada thought was stupid. Like one time a devotee kept asking Prabhupada about some material things. And Prabhupada said, how do I know? I'm not God. But of course, for many devotees, Prabhupada did know because whatever Prabhupada says, it's Krishna speaking through him. And whatever Prabhupada does, it's Krishna acting through him, which is impersonalism. Because it means that we know absolutely nothing about Prabhupada, and we can never know anything about Prabhupada. All we can know about Prabhupada is that he's fully surrendered to Krishna. Because everything he says is Krishna speaking, not Prabhupada. Everything he does is Krishna acting, not Prabhupada. So we know nothing about Prabhupada except that he's a pure devotee. And we can never know. He has no personality of his own. He has no personal preferences. He's just this hollow vessel. So it's kind of the idea that when you fully surrender to Krishna, that's the last personal choice you ever make. Yeah, it's called impersonal. So when you fully surrender to Krishna, it's not that you become more than ever a person. You stop being it. That's the last personal decision you'll ever make for all eternity. Which is absurd. And as we know, in Krishna Lila, all of his devotees have their own personalities, their own preferences. And so when Jayadvaita asked Prabhupada, does a pure devotee know everything in this world? And Prabhupada thought it was like, what? That's not a serious question. He said, of course not. He said, you don't understand what it means to be a pure devotee. It doesn't mean that you know that you're materially infallible or materially omniscient. So Prabhupada again and again told us, I am not materially omniscient. I am not materially infallible. But he is a pure devotee. He is directly in touch with Krishna. And he is the founder Acharya of ISKCON. And we are serving him. If Prabhupada asks for theological water, don't bring him theological milk. You're not being faithful to Prabhupada by saying about him things that he denied about himself. That doesn't mean that you love Prabhupada. It means you're not paying attention. So the real question is, should you accept Prabhupada's teaching on everything, or is there one very important thing that on which you should reject what Prabhupada said and understand it your own way? And that is Prabhupada himself. Should you reject what Prabhupada said about himself and instead substitute your own idea because it's grander? That's the real question. So if you take the real Prabhupada that he presented, then it's a Prabhupada who is a pure devotee, no question, is the founder Acharya of ISKCON, and who, in terms of material things, is not necessarily infallible, is not infallible, not omniscient. That's how Prabhupada taught about himself. I prefer to learn about Prabhupada from Prabhupada. I don't know what your source is. And I've been stressing this point and actually it's gotten through to some of the leaders of the movement. I've been stressing this point that the highest authority on Prabhupada is Prabhupada. It's not whoever glorifies him the most is the authority. Prabhupada is the authority on Prabhupada. And actually, in the latest draft for an ISKCON constitution, they actually use that quote I gave, but of course they don't mention my name because then a lot of people won't accept it. So, but they do it a lot, actually. They've done it a lot, used my points, but they just don't mention my name, which is fine with me. But they actually said that verbatim in the draft constitution, that the highest authority on Prabhupada is Prabhupada. So I'm interested in a spiritual science, learning one, practicing one, and teaching one. And the advantage of letting Prabhupada explain who he is rather than substituting some grander idea of sort of like, sort of backdoor, Prabhupada's God, but coming through the back door. No, he's not God, he's just infallible and omniscient. So the advantage of seeing Prabhupada as he presented himself is it gives you flexibility to make his movement work. And you realize you can't just bring out this or that quote on this or that and as if there's no need for discussion and there's nothing to talk about. It's not the battle of the quotes. It's about being a mature adult and reasoning according to within Prabhupada's parameters. So thank you very much for letting me harass you in this way. Yes? Yeah, Auntie Leela when he retired, yeah. And the Madhya Leelas when Prabhupada, of course, he went out and personally preached and established a powerful movement, and they turned it over to us. But I think that Vrindavan Leela of Prabhupada, in the early days, that's the ISKCON I want to really, as far as possible, resurrect. where we are collegial. We don't just, not that someone is just like way above someone else. We're more collegial. Women are fully respected. We're respected by the public. That's another thing. Back in those early days, we totally fit in. We were part of the youth scene. I mean, the devotees were following their principles, but we weren't perceived as like, from another planet. We were part of the youth scene. And so, yeah, so I want to get back to that, where the relationship with Prabhupada is more real based on what Prabhupada said about himself, that the relationship between devotees is more collegial and not just, one group of people just like way over everybody else. And so that, if you're not a big leader, then you have to remain a mental child for the rest of your life. And as far as our relationship with the public, being friends to the public, really sincerely bringing them in and making them feel comfortable, and not just, insist, because the more you advance in Krishna consciousness, the less you want to be different than everybody else, because you see everyone else as friends, as people you should be kind to. It's kind to the conditioned souls to make them comfortable with devotees. That is an act of kindness. That is an act of kindness, to make them feel comfortable with us and not force them to sort of run this gauntlet where you have to change your ethnic tradition and you have to get into some foreign culture just in order to love God. I mean, why would we do that? Why would we force people to change their whole culture and their whole ethnic tradition? And there are very few takers. Why would we force people to do that just to have access to God? So, yes. Turning point?
What happened that you wanted to become part of the
I read the Beta Tattva thing, actually. I was at home, just I was a young guys on the couch reading the Bhagavad Gita, and the Prabhupada said we're qualitatively one with God and quantitatively different. I just shouted out Eureka. I mean, I just knew this is the absolute truth. This is the perfect explanation of everything. And of course, I loved going to the temple. I didn't want to live in a temple, but I loved going to the temple. I used to get my mother's car, nice dark green Dodge Dart. And I would drive Tamal Krishna Brahmachari and Vishnu Jana Brahmachari. I'd drive them out to Harinam, my mother's car. They would preach to me. So, so the turning point was, I loved everything about Krishna consciousness. When I read that, I realized that I could not give up my intellectual integrity. This is the absolute truth. And I really like the devotees. I like Prasham, everything. I'll tell you one funny story. Anyway, I'll tell you this. I'm not known as a great mystic. I'm more like, philosophical side. But I decided, well, I guess I have to be a Hare Krishna, but I'm not going to actually live in a temple. I'm not going to actually formally join. And then went to sleep one night. In the middle of the night, I just woke up and sat up straight, fully awake. And then Krishna kind of, anyway, showed himself to me in a certain way. And so I said, Krishna, and then I just said, okay, I'll join the movement. And I went back to sleep. And so that was actually the moment. Then, of course, I still trying to weasel out. But, Krishna got me. So, thank you all very much. And give generously. All right, good. So thank you all out there for watching, and Hare Krishna.